your reach are nature zones, along a beach or just at home. Whether you seek to be alone or in a group, there is a nature zone.
Hello and welcome. It's time to get straight out of clothes. I'm your host, Earl D, and welcome to this podcast that covers interviews and reviews from the clothes-free, naturist, and nudist community. We're excited to have on our program today Will Forrest, the author of Coed Naked Philosophy, and frankly, one of the first people that I came across in terms of folks who were writing naturist-themed fiction, coming to us via Skype today. Well, Will, welcome to Straight Out of Clothes.
Thank you so much for inviting me. It's an honor to be here, and I want to start by congratulating you, Earl, for all of your efforts in putting together what has become a very large source of information for many people about naturism.
Oh, I appreciate that. Well, I think we've talked about this before in the online space, but you have to take some responsibility for that. So if it doesn't come off well, I'm going to point a finger at you, because reading Coed Naked Philosophy was very much an inspiration for a change in how I sought to move into that online space, and really was the impetus for developing the clothes-free-life.com website as an online resource and web magazine. And for our listeners who are new to the podcast, the Straight Out of Clothes podcast, you can find show notes for this particular show with links to all kinds of resources for this conversation with Will Forrest on our website, clothes-free-life.com. And you can listen to this podcast. You may have found it on our Spreaker site, Spreaker.com/clothes-free-life, or you can actually subscribe on iTunes and on Stitcher. So please check all of those platforms out. And you can talk to us at clothes-free-life.com or on Twitter at Live Clothes Free, Instagram Clothes Free Life, and all the major platforms as Clothes Free Life. So again, Will, welcome on board. It's been a long time coming. I'm grateful for the opportunity to talk with you. As I said, you were an inspiration, and wanted to talk to you ahead of this upcoming week where some folks have dubbed it National Naked Reading Day on Tuesday, July 5th. And I thought it would be just a great opportunity to have an author on the show and to just talk about what's happening in terms of the whole genre of naturist-themed fiction. So I think of you as a pioneer in that genre, but our listeners might not be familiar with you or your work. How would you go about describing yourself to our listeners today?
Thanks. Well, I want to say again, I'm just I'm humbled to know that that reading Coed Naked Philosophy had something of an impact on you. When I started writing that book, I didn't know it was going to be a book. I was just writing. I was reacting to something that had happened to me where I used to live. And so it started to come together as a novel, but it took, more than 10 years, I think, to get through everything that I was working on and eventually making the decision to publish through the Amazon CreateSpace site. And at the time I did that, I said, okay, I'm going to set up a blog. I'm going to set up a Twitter feed to go with this and kind of, get my voice out there. And, it's nice to hear you say the word pioneer. There are, in fact, other folks that I would call pioneers, and I should give a shout out to Tom Pine. One of the things on my blog site is a series I've done called Disrobing Suspense, and it's a series of interviews with other naturist fiction writers. And Tom Pine, his stuff is phenomenal. He has written so many short stories, and they are so varied, and everything from science fiction to adventure to romance to western to fantasy, but they're all naturist. And to my knowledge, he doesn't have them out there anywhere that you can purchase them. You can read them on his site. It's called TNTN, The Naked Truth Naturist. You have to register on the site. You have to get a password. But once you do that, you can read all of his stories, and they are phenomenal.
Wow, that's a great resource. Thank you for sharing that. So would you say that he was your inspiration to move towards writing naturist-themed fiction?
Well, no, although he certainly did become something of an inspiring figure. I remember I spoke with him on the phone at one point, probably a good 5 or 6 years ago now. And he, certainly, yes, he was an encouraging voice. I was motivated to write because there was a confluence of things that happened to me. I was at work one day and I got a call, and the person on the phone was asking me to do a striptease at a bachelorette party. Now that's just, how often does that happen? And it was, I thought this is crazy. It's a Monday morning. What are you doing on my phone asking this? And I didn't do it.
It's never happened to me. So you're one up.
Well, it was very flattering. Yeah, it was very flattering, but I didn't do it. And then shortly after that, or actually I'm not remembering which happened first, but my family and I went to a unofficial nude beach in the Florida Panhandle, and it was a wonderful day. There were just, lots of people at the beach of all shapes, sizes, colors, whatever. And it was great. And so the confluence of these things just motivated me to start writing. And I didn't know, like I said, I didn't know really what shape it was going to take. I did at one point take it to a writing workshop and had it, critiqued and fleshed it out. And I tried to go the traditional route of finding an agent. And I had a little bit of interest from agents. But after about 2 years of that, I realized, this is kind of a niche thing, and I want to go ahead and publish it through CreateSpace. So I did.
Wow, that's a very, very cool story about that, how that developed. It's as if for most people, this stuff just kind of emerges through these accidental, incidental, serendipitous kind of interactions, like me with your book, you in those situations that you just described, and those things then emerge or unfold or surface this latent expression that comes about. Would you describe yourself as a naturist, a nudist, someone who lives close free? How do you describe yourself in that regard?
No, yeah. I mean, I definitely describe myself as a naturist. What does that mean to me? It means, being free of clothes as much as I can, indoor, outdoor, and introducing my family to that. There is a wonderful park here in Oklahoma, not that far away, that we go to. But we don't go all the time. We're not members. We don't live really close enough to do that, but we certainly enjoy going out there. And I've helped them build up their programming a bit out there as well. So, and sometimes, there are other occasions to introduce the people, friends, to naturism. So yeah, no, naturism it certainly has become a big part of my life.
The way you describe it, the way it emerged out of just some ordinary practical experiences really resonates with me. It resonates with the approach we have at Close Free Life, that this is just ordinary people finding this space or finding themselves in a space. It's not too highfalutin, it's not too forced. It's just a natural emergence of this experience. I'm curious, how do you respond to that?
Well, I mean, when you say highfalutin, it makes me think maybe of like, I don't know, like Renaissance art or something where people associate social nudity or being naked outdoors with some kind of, vision of paradise painted by someone in Italy in the 15th century or something. But there's the more everyday part of it. I mean, I like to think about it, frankly, in terms of health. I think it's just very, very healthy. You know,
Well,
it's a matter of vitamins. It's a matter of, I mean, not just vitamin D, but the exposure of the skin. I mean, I know for my skin, it's great. And just, I don't know, you feel different, right? We all kind of talk about this. You feel more relaxed. You feel more open. You feel more egalitarian, you know, when you're around everyone who's also clothes free, and not just physical, but mental and emotional health too.
right. From reading the book, it seemed to me like the characters in the book really their encounter with being clothes free, adopting a naturist expression of life seem to flow so naturally from as a result of their other life experiences, other than rather than being something that was kind of brought in from out in left field somewhere and then interjected into life. Is that at all accurate? That was what I was picking up.
Yeah. Yes, yes, I understand what you're saying. In fact, the way I remember organizing that novel was that in the first part of the novel there are what you're saying, contexts that are kind of more everyday. So, for example, one of the students is in art class. You know, it's life modeling. So, of course, there's a model who's nude. Other students are organizing a streak around campus because that's something that college students do. There are several circumstances like that, and they come together to kind of pool their resources and help in the novel they help the philosophy department. The philosophy department is in danger of being eliminated by, like, you know, state agencies or something because it doesn't have enough majors. So they pool their resources and excite interest in philosophy by exploring precisely the philosophy of social nudity, of naturism, of our human bodies. And that's in the second part of the novel. Then that's when the classes start that are meeting in the nude and talking about these topics. And they get, in the second part of the novel, they become more proactive, more socially active. They take their message to the streets. They try to get community people involved, that kind of thing. So yeah, there's a natural progression of it.
I think that's the thing that really captured my attention and engaged me in the book was that it didn't start with the philosophy. It started with what they were already doing, how they were already living. And then as they began to be more involved, then the whole philosophical aspect of it began to make more sense, began to be delved into more deeply and embraced. And then that brought the whole together. So it wasn't just the practice or the ability or the action of getting naked, and it wasn't just a philosophical ideal. It was both coming together, and that really resonated with me. And I think that's what stuck with me: the idea of, you know, giving life to the ideals and to the practice, not just the philosophical thinking and not just the practice of you know, taking your clothes off. That's big whoop. But bringing both of those together is what makes naturism, nudism real. Did
Go
I
ahead.
get something out of it that wasn't supposed to? Or, you
No,
know,
no, no, goodness, of course not. That's it. No, you're exactly right. And of course, well, everyone who is an active and a thorough reader is going to get something out of it. But what I wanted to say was that there is a scene when the students are deciding to form their own group, and they're debating what to call themselves. And, you know, someone says, let's call ourselves the Coed Naked Philosophers or something like that. And that's shouted down. And eventually they choose the name Corporal Rights Movement, I believe it is, because they want it to be not just, as you're saying, they want it to be not just about the benefit of, say, taking your clothes off, but more about, hey, let's respect each other as human beings. Let's respect our bodies. Let's respect our health.
yeah, that I think that's a powerful theme that the writers that I've read, who I've really appreciated in this emerging genre, I really seem to capture this idea of, you know, it's about respecting the human body. It's respecting the human being behind the body. And again, your work was one of the first that really presented that to me in a way that just sat right with me and sat right in my spirit, and I just really appreciate that. What do you hope readers are going to get in addition to a sense of this a good story? Because that's one of the things I want to say to our listeners. This is a well written piece of work. This is good story. I mean, when I started reading it, I couldn't put it down. I finished it in a very short order, because it was well written, easy to read. The characters are engaging, and so I'm curious, what do you hope readers get out of the novel?
I'm going to refer all future readers to you. I don't think I could ask for more than what you said that you got out of it. I mean, frankly, and again, it's very humbling to hear you. But yeah, I would hope that people would get exactly that the message that this is something that is not only possible, it's good for you. It's good for society. It's something that really, it's so basic, and yet perhaps for the same reason people overlook it, people think or shrug it off or giggle. But in fact, it's really so earnest and so powerful. What I knew when the book finally started to take shape, I knew I could see where it was going to end, and I wanted the ending to be this kind of sense of community. Right? I mean, the ending takes place on the college campus, but there's been a hurricane and there's been flooding and there's been damage to people's homes. And so people are using this humanities building as a shelter, as a kind of a, refuge from the storm. This is a common thing on the Gulf Coast. And so in this kind of community, it's just kind of gradually understood that, it's hot and we don't really have resources to be washing clothes right now and this kind of stuff. And it doesn't matter if you're not wearing something, whatever that something might be. And that's where I'd like to get people to go. That's where I'd like people to arrive, at that sense that, clothing is very arbitrary and it just, it's not necessary. And often we're all better without it.
Mm. So I really think that's a powerful image that anybody can connect with, and I think that's one of the things that's so powerful about your book. What are you working on now? Is there anything in the hopper? Is there a sequel in the works or anything else that you want to share with us?
Yeah, thank you for asking, because this is what really motivates me to write. And when I published that book and I decided I was going to make a blog at the same time, I've really enjoyed writing on the blog too. Sometimes things are more philosophical, sometimes poetry, sometimes short stories. Right now I'm working on a kind of a serial that's like a mystery that takes place about, it's a lighthearted thing. It takes place in the Caribbean, and there are these moths that are eating everyone's clothes. They're moths that can eat any kind of clothes. And so this retired entomologist, someone who studies insects, she's having to work to figure out what's happening and what's behind all this. And it's just it's very lighthearted, but I'm enjoying writing it. But the big thing that I'm working on is another novel. And in fact, I'm working on the final draft right now. It is not a sequel. It's, different characters, different settings, but it is also naturist fiction. It's just that it's more along the lines of, if you could imagine something more like a Da Vinci Code type thing, where there are people searching for answers in ancient documents and ancient art, and it takes them on a kind of a quest in different parts of the world. And I really like it. I'm very satisfied with it. I also saw the ending of this one early on, and I've been able to bring it to the right ending. So I'm excited to get it out. The artist that I work with is working on the final version of the cover, and hopefully I can get it out this summer.
Oh, that sounds great. I'm excited to hear that. You heard that first here on Straight Out of Clothes, folks. The next novel coming up from Will Forrest, hopefully out this summer, and we're excited to hear that. We're talking with Will Forrest on Straight Out of Clothes via Skype. He's the author of the novel, Nature's themed novel, Coed Naked Philosophy. And he also blogs, and you can read this new serial story that he's working on at
Nudescribe, NUDESCRIBE blogspot.com. And it's been a good service, but there is you get to that URL and there's an initial page that comes up that says something about adult content. I don't know why that got smacked on me, but you have to click on that before you can get to the content. I might change providers at some point.
All right. Well, definitely if you do that, let us know about any switchover that you might make. A couple more questions for you. Can you share with our listeners a little bit more about what is your close free experience like? You touched on it a little bit. You talked about introducing your family. Your family goes with you to clothing optional venues and so on. Could you share a little bit more about that, as much as you feel comfortable?
Sure. It's been very interesting to. I mean, it's a great question. It's a great question. Thanks for asking, because it's one thing to write about something, and then it's quite another to try to make that a part of your life. And again, as you say, both in philosophy and in practice. And so, in my case, it was very helpful to have some friends who live at the naturist park nearby, so that they live there year round, so that we were able to visit them and spend time with them. And in that way, my family felt more comfortable, going to that venue. And it was a way of kind of easing into that context. And so really without them, I don't think it would have been, I don't know if possible, but certainly would not have been as easy. And so in my case, I have my, my spouse and my two children, and we've all been out there as a family several times, or three of the four of us have, different configurations or whatever. But it's, I'm still the standard bearer, right? I'm still the one who's just the most forthright about it. But what's been good is that my family understands it, has participated in it. And so any judgment that they make, the three of them as individuals, comes from having had that experience.
Right.
So I just think that's so important. I mean, now that door is open to them. My children, who in the future may want to do something, along those lines, now they know they have an a positive experience. I should emphasize a positive experience as a base for what kinds of decisions they might make in the future. And in fact, one of my children had a surgery, and I'm forgetting the name of it, but we went out to the park shortly after she had this surgery, and she, got some sun on the spot where the surgery had happened. And the pediatric surgeon, when she went in later for her follow-up, said she had never seen a surgery that healed so quickly.
Oh, wow.
And the surgery happened to be on a part of her body that is not normally exposed to the sun. Let's put it that way. When things like that happen, I don't know about you, I kind of have to stand back and say, wow, I mean, this is just, it really is a powerful, healthy thing.
Yeah, I wish more conversations like that were shared, that the health benefits, and you've seen some of our work on closefreelife.com and what we're trying to do, and I just feel like that aspect of it is not leveraged enough and talked about enough. And it's ironic, I think, sometimes that the talk about the health benefits and all of those things comes from outside the community, outside the naturist or nudist context more often than it does from inside. And at least online, that's what it seems like. And I wish we could hear more stories like that. So thank you for sharing that one. I want to talk a little more about this emerging genre. It seems like, when I first encountered your book, Coed Naked Philosophy, I was like, hunting, are there others out there, are there other people writing? And it took a while to find other uh, works that were as good, but it seems now that there are a lot of people writing to this genre. What do you think about that? What's your take on the whole genre? And and maybe comment on, can we somehow get Amazon to make the distinction between naturist themed fiction and erotica?
Yeah. Wow. Well, it's a great question, and I think you're right to use the word genre to say, naturist fiction can be a genre. That's certainly the way some of us talk about it. As I mentioned on my blog, I have a series that you can find the header for it at the top of the blog called Disrobing Suspense, and there are 6 interviews I've done now with different naturist writers out there in the world, and everyone comes at it from a different angle, and people are producing some great stuff. You're absolutely right. You can have naturist fiction that's science fiction. I'm thinking of Paul Walker. I know he's contributed to your site many times. He wrote recently Mirror Earth, and he's working on Mirror Earth 2, and that's just such a wonderful example of how you can use a science fiction setting to really drive home points about the benefits of social nudity. He's also written a fantasy series, Naked Crow. Then there's Nick Alamonos, who's working on an entire fantasy world called World of Enya. There's Robert Longpré. I think he's also a skyclad therapist. I think he's also worked with you before, who, he's written autobiographies, written poetry. When I interviewed him, we focused on his fiction about pilgrims on the Camino de Santiago in Europe, and how nudity.
We had him on the show recently.
Yeah.
And
exactly.
he did reference you and what you were doing. Yeah, absolutely.
And it's interesting because there are folks all over the world. There's Stephen Crowley, of course. Robert's in Canada. Stephen Crowley in Australia. I don't know that he's doing anything lately, but he was certainly a pioneer in naturist webtoon comics. His comics are still online. You can find them. It was Loxy and Zoot, and then it became the Bear Pit.
Right.
BARE.
I remember those. Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. And again, I don't think he's been active lately, but speaking of pioneers, he certainly was, and hopefully still is. And Tom Pine, that I mentioned, and Cor Van de Sande is another one in Canada. And it seems unfortunately a little like a men's club. I wish that I could find more women who are writing naturist fiction. I know people like Huntony Hart who are just doing terrific work in poetry and in essay. To my knowledge, I don't think that she's done anything in fiction, but I'm just going to have to start a new series and speak with women who are writing period, not necessarily fiction, but writing about naturism.
Right. Well, I'm trying to prompt Huntony to get connected with Robert and his new publishing house that he's putting together to promote that kind of naturist themed works out there. And I'm really encouraging him. And we're trying to put together that poetry anthology of poems under that publishing house, of poems that have been submitted for our poetry contest. You've submitted one in the past, and so that's the first project we're working on with him, and hopefully there'll be more to come. But I really am excited, and we'll have links to your pages on your website with the interviews in the show notes for this on closefreelife.com, and hopefully people will be able to get more exposure to some of these writers, old and new, that are emerging. And just so you know, for my money, there are 2 naturist themed or naturist oriented works that I've read that I'm putting my money out there to see made into a movie. And one is Coed Naked Philosophy. I think it would lend itself really well to that. And the second is Paul Walker, Mirror Earth. And I've mentioned that to Paul as well. I think both of those would lend themselves really well to a creative art director to pick up and do that. And I think that's what we need. I really think that would be a great way for people to get the kind of exposure that you've described your family having, to begin to see ordinary people. I mean, it strikes me that as I'm listening to you describing what your family's experience was, that a key to it was that these were ordinary people that they knew, that you were able to spend time with at this clothing optional venue. Does that resonate at all? Does that sound on track?
Yeah, that's exactly right. And you've reminded me of a couple of things I wanted to say. First, thank you so much again for saying that you'd like to see it made into a film. I certainly would too. And it's important for naturist artists to support each other. Because there are all kinds of us, right? There are painters, there are filmmakers, there are musicians, etc. And sometimes those of us who write suffer from something you mentioned earlier, which is this kind of mix on Amazon that you might not, you might find something you weren't necessarily looking for. Well, I guess all of us suffer from that, right? If you're putting content out there that says naturist, that label gets co-opted. But there is a lot of, well, I shouldn't even say a lot. If you do a search on Amazon, you may come across some titles that are not really naturist content. They may say that they take place on a nude beach or something, but they're really more erotic content. And unfortunately, some of the people that I wish would be a bit more distinguishing of these, those of us who write sometimes get lumped into the same group. All these people that write and self-publish, it's because they're all writing this kind of erotica stuff, and that's not fair and it's not true. So it's important to read the reviews of what you're looking at on Amazon and get a sense of, is this really naturist or is it something else? And like I say, it's important for us naturist artists to support each other. And I'm thinking of J.P. Riley, because he's, of course, a naturist filmmaker. Right. And I believe his second film is about to come out. I think they've had some post-production issues, but I think that they're working on the let's see, what's it called? Act Supernaturally, right?
Actually, Supernaturally, yeah. We're hoping to have them on the show in a few weeks. I've been talking to JP and Kansi, his partner in the project, about coming on and sharing that ahead of the release of the show, of the movie Act Supernaturally.
And that's well, I was just going to say, I mean, again, thanks to you and maybe just a handful of other sites out there, but in large part your site, that people can find more information about who's out there doing what. And you, and I want to say too, you not only are pointing people in the right direction, but you're producing original content. And I want to say again how terrific it was to read the pieces that you did in February for Black History Month about the naturist tradition, or what could be called naturist tradition from Africa. It's so important for all of us to understand more, certainly the European context, but beyond that, to know how all peoples everywhere have practices that have to do with social nudity and health.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. I appreciate that. That means a lot coming from you. And one of the projects that we're working on right now, once we launch, we're launching our social network in a few weeks here fully. And once we launch that and know that that's going okay, the next project is going to be something that we threw out there probably a little less than a year ago. The idea of creating a site, a kind of a hub for naturist creatives, whether they were artists, graphic designers, writers, a hub where people could go to and discover their work, purchase their work, interact with them in that environment, and just be a vehicle for getting this out there. Because the more I think, and as we get ready to wrap up here, I'd like your perspective on this. I think the more we can bring these themes, these ideals, this practice, this philosophy into spaces where people already naturally, ordinarily function. A good book's a good book, right? And if it's a good
Yeah,
book
yeah,
that
yeah.
happens to be about a naturist context, that's not going to drive a reader away if they're engaged by the characters and if the people in the book begin to take on a life and a meaning for the reader. So if we can bring this good, high quality stuff into these spaces, like JP's doing with the movie, and like Tondu does with his music, for instance, I think we can really make inroads in another way. It's not to say don't do all the other things, but in another way we can make some inroads into the broader mainstream. I'd love your take on that.
Yeah, it's an excellent point. And again, we've mentioned her already, but Anthony Hart has been the past couple months. I've just loved reading what she's putting out because she has this perspective that we need to, especially involving women in naturism, we just need to look at getting the tendrils out into these other contexts. For example, something like yoga. So many people can appreciate yoga, and then nude yoga has gotten a lot of press, and so then the question comes up: oh, well, what would happen if I were to try it? This context that's already established, but if I were to try it nude socially. And so it's a step that people, can take. And then lots of people have written, right, all over the world. Lots of people have written their articles, their reporting about, oh, I went to nude yoga class and here's what happened, right? But the more that idea gets out there, it's a way of spreading ideas, as you say, into spaces that already exist, that people can think of them in new ways. Mm-hmm. It's a great idea.
Well, I really appreciate you coming on. And I said at the top of the program that we're looking at Naked Reading Day next week, and I just want to wrap with that question. Yeah. So, Naked Reading Day, helpful, moving into different spaces, or just kind of a cute thing? What's your take, Will Forrest?
Yeah, it's a great question. I don't know who came up with it, but why not? I mean, I think the good response is why not? If you can have World Naked Gardening Day, if you can have World Naked Bike Ride that happens at different times in different cities. The idea is that you wouldn't necessarily have to be gardening nude on this specified day, but it's a day to call attention to it. And there's something about curling up with a good book, even if it's on an e-reader. There's something about curling up with a good book and are you going to have a more fully corporeal experience? Are you going to more fully enter into the world of the book if you're nude? Well, I would say yes, and I think a lot of people agree with that, and other people should just try and see for themselves.
Great. I appreciate that perspective. Is there anything you'd like to share with our listeners as we get ready to wrap up here? We've been talking with Will Forrest, the author of Coed Naked Philosophy. You can find it on Amazon. Are there any other sources where they're going to be able to find that book, Will? And what else would you like to share with us as we wrap?
I wanted to say thanks again for inviting me. You can find, the book Coed Naked Philosophy you can find on other sites too. For example, Powell's Books. I think you can find it on Barnes & Noble. It's at different sites, and it's available in electronic version. And I'm going to try to do the same with the new book that's coming out. And I will let you know as soon as that comes out. I'll put that on my own blog too. The working title for that new book is Aglow, Aglow. And in some ways, it's like a new interpretation of the legend of El Dorado. So I hope that will entice some readers to check it out when it comes out. And thanks again. Stay nude and stay positive and spread the word.
We have been talking with Will Forrest, the author of Coed Naked Philosophy and the upcoming new novel, Aglow. And you can look forward to receiving word about that on this program and on our website, closefreelife.com. Thank you for joining us for this episode of Straight Out of Clothes, where you hear the latest reviews and interviews related to naturism, nudism, and clothes-free living. If you enjoy our show, we hope you will check out our other podcasts and episodes at Spreaker.com/Close Free Life. That's SPREAKER.com/Close Free Life, one word. And you can also find us on social media at Live Close Free on Twitter and Close Free Life on Instagram, Pinterest, closefreelife.tumblr.com, and Close Free Life on YouTube and Google+. To subscribe to our episodes, you can subscribe on Stitcher and iTunes, and look for show notes on our website at closefreelife.com. I'm your host, Earl D. Thank you for listening. Our theme music is Nature Zones, provided by Bare Body Freedom activist, musician, and songwriter Tandu.